KSJE is supported by the Farmington Civic Center, bringing a full slate of entertainment to Farmington and San Juan County. Dancing with the Farmington Stars, Saturday, February 19th at 7 p.m. The Farmington Civic Center, 200 West Arrington in downtown Farmington. Find out more online at fmtn.org/shows or at 505-599-1148. 10 minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Tuesday morning, February 15th, 2022. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Michlin. Thanks for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM, of course, over the air here in San Juan County, New Mexico. Streaming everywhere else on the planet from KSJE.com. And we also welcome our viewers who are watching this visual radio program. The video is streaming out live this morning to the KSJE Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and our Twitter account. Welcome aboard, everyone. We're glad that you are with us. Coming up in the next few moments, my conversation with the Superintendent of Schools for the Aztec School District. Superintendent Kevin Summers is here, standing by, so stay tuned for that. Then later on this hour, we'll be checking in with Amber Francisco from the Farmington Regional Animal Shelter. She'll be introducing us to some of the pets available for adoption this week, including this fine-looking gentleman on the screen right there. That's Gilbert, who is waiting for his forever home. We'll learn more about him and some of the other pets coming up today at 8:50 a.m. right here on KSJE. Next hour, Mick Hess is going to take us roving with the arts, and today Mick is featuring Neil Sedaka. That's what's got me all confused, because Neil Sedaka is on Roving with the Arts today, and I think that's the first time in 15 years I've had to say that. So enjoy some Neil Sedaka coming up today at 9:06 on KSJE. And don't forget, in addition to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, you can also connect with us on our Instagram page as well. And if you're a podcast person, you can connect with KSJE and subscribe for free to our podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. So check us out on those popular platforms. Weather forecast outside our studios here at San Juan College. It's a cloudy morning this morning, 35 degrees at the moment. We're expecting a partly cloudy day today with a high of 62 this afternoon, so quite mild. Overnight low tonight with partly cloudy skies, 29, but then a change tomorrow with colder temperatures. Chance of rain and snow showers on Wednesday with a high of 47 degrees. More chances for snow overnight tomorrow night with a low near 29. Partly cloudy, but colder on Thursday with a high reaching only 49 degrees. Clear Thursday night with a low near 20. Back up to 52 with sunshine on Friday, 57 by Saturday, and back to nearly 60 degrees with sunshine on Sunday, before the next storm system might move in for Monday and Monday night. We'll keep an eye on that. All right, let me turn to my guest who is here with me this morning, Superintendent of Schools, as I mentioned, for the Aztec School District. Kevin Summers is here. Mr. Summers, good morning. Welcome back to KSJE.
Oh, good morning, Scott. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for coming in. Always great to catch up with you. And I guess since I just talked about the weather, I wanted to ask you a bit about your snow day.
Sure,
a week or so ago, right, in Aztec Schools.
We did have a snow day. In fact, we had made a commitment pretty early in the school year. Actually, it might have been even in July, that dependent on the weather, we were going to allow kids the opportunity to be kids. We've got some great advancements in technology now, and we can shift to a virtual or remote learning day at any given time. But there are still times where our kids need to just take a break and play in the snow, and our families need that, and our staff needs that. Cuddle up on the couch with a book or watch a movie with the kids because school has been canceled. And so we made the call originally to shift to a virtual learning day because of what the snow looked like to us. It wasn't a whole lot in our town proper, but as we started getting out into kind of the outlying areas of the district, we recognized that some of these roads are a little dicey, and it's not safe to operate buses, and it's certainly not safe to have our staff report to the building. So we went ahead and made the call to just go ahead and cancel the entire day.
There you go. And so that is kind of your, I guess, policy, right, when it comes to weather and declaring snow days or delays or whatever the case may be, right?
Absolutely,
moving forward. So
we've got a little bit of a decision tree there. So.
Right, of course. And I know your folks are out, like most other school districts, really early in the mornings trying to predict how the weather's going to be as buses hit the roads and things like that. And, of course, Aztec School District heads all the way up into the Colorado border, of course, to the north, out to Navajo Dam to the east. And so those are some of those areas you've got to be careful about, right? Absolutely. When you're talking about buses on roads.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times, there might not be any snow or ice on the roads in Aztec itself, but as we get into those outlying areas towards the border, out to the dam, we even have some location up in Crouch Mesa on the Flora Vista side, and so we really have to take into consideration everybody. And it might be safe for the kiddo who lives just a block from school, but the kiddo who lives 45 minutes from school, we have to take that into consideration.
Sure, exactly. And you mentioned your staff too, and I know you have some folks that drive in from Colorado, you have folks that drive in from all directions. All roads lead to Aztec schools.
That's right.
You have to think about all those things, right?
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, I think on behalf of your students and maybe teachers, thanks for the snow day for a couple of weeks ago, if you hadn't heard already. But let me ask you about some other things, too, on our list to talk about this morning. One is a new mission for Aztec schools. And so let me show the audience what we're talking about here. And this is Aztec Municipal School District, different by design. And so obviously a lot of thought went into that. So talk to me a bit about the thoughts behind this.
So, when you think about a mission should describe how the organization does business. And so moving forward, what we want out of Aztec Municipal School District is to be different. Over the last 125 years, education hasn't changed at all. We're still requiring the same graduation requirements that we did in the late 1800s. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily for everybody as well. We've seen our world has shifted dramatically, especially in the last 2 years, but certainly in the last 10 to 15 years. And as one of the largest employers in town, we know that the town can essentially live and die with us. If our enrollment drops and we're having to close schools, then potentially the town can start to dry up and fizzle out. So in an effort to prevent that, in an effort to really serve our community, we're going to go about things a little bit differently. We're going to try some new academic efforts that have never been tried before in the entire state, let alone in Aztec in the Four Corners area. And some of that also can play into calendaring and what can we do that's creative in terms of calendaring and professional development for teachers and breaks for our students.
Got it. And so good luck with all that. And I'm sure maybe there may be some parents who are watching this morning and listening to us this morning wondering, but will my kids still get a good education with all these things going on with Aztec schools? Because maybe different can be good, but maybe it's different could also be not so good. You're
absolutely right. In fact, when you hear the legislature talk about instructional calendar, they want to tell you that more is better, but we know that more isn't always better. Instead, we want to tell you that better is better. So currently, right now, statute is based on the number of instructional hours in a year. So for elementary, it's 990 hours, or for secondary, it's 1,080 hours. And the way that kind of splits out into what we would typically call the 180-day school year is looking at the instructional minimums for each day. So for elementary, it's 5.5 hours, and for secondary, it's 6 hours. So 5.5 hours 990 hours divided by 5.5 gets you to 180, and the same is true for secondary. When we start looking at what our instructional calendar looks like right now in Aztec, we already far exceed those instructional minimums daily. So instead of 5.5 hours for our elementaries, we actually already have 6.25 hours. Instead of 6 hours for our secondaries, we're at about 6.5 hours. And so when you really start looking at the instructional minimums across the entire calendar, we exceed the instructional minimum by upwards of 14 days, dependent on the calendar. This is a little bit different year for us because we inherited the extended learning time program, which was an additional 10 days. But as it stands right now in the Appropriations Act, it doesn't look like that's going to be required of school districts this year. So we know that both our staff and our community have been pretty vocal about the extended learning time program and discontent around that particular program. So we're not looking to incorporate that again.
Got it. And so we'll talk about the calendar and some of the things that you are discussing, right, for the next school year.
Yes, sir.
And depending on what the legislature does, I suppose, too,
Yeah.
and the governor eventually signs. But that's part of being different, right? But I guess that word has a lot of other components to it, or could, right, depending on how you want to run with it, as you mentioned, of making Aztec schools and students excel by maybe teaching them differently or meeting them where they are educationally, or all those different things, because we know, at least I think I've learned over the last few years, that kids don't learn maybe the way we've learned for 150 years. I think they're learning maybe differently these days. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. We have to take into consideration generational differences, right? The kiddos that are walking through our doors now, they've never existed in a time when cell phones didn't exist.
Right.
You know, my own kiddos, I've got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, they can operate an iPad. It blows my mind how they can do it. And I think I'm pretty tech savvy, but they can do things that I didn't even know we're capable of. So being different by design helps us to kind of rethink what the educational experience looks like, whether that's how we instruct, what we instruct, and then being good stewards of the things that are within our influence, not necessarily our control. So we were talking earlier, Scott, about graduation requirements.
Right.
And New Mexico has a graduation requirement of 24 credit hours, which is one of the most stringent requirements across the nation. We look at the top 10 performing states, Massachusetts being number 1, they don't require 24 credit hours. So as an organization, for us to be different by design, we're really advocating the state legislature, the public education department, to kind of rethink what the graduation requirements should be, and why. Why do we have those particular requirements? And so I always use Algebra 2 as the example.
Okay.
And sometimes this isn't a great example because I get Algebra 2 teachers mad at me, but I kind of think about, like, when are the times that we've ever really needed to use Algebra 2? And it almost always comes down to, if I'm an engineer, great, okay,
Right.
or if I'm an Algebra 2 teacher. And that's about it, you know. We talk about Algebra 2 as being a graduation requirement, which it is, but...
Send your letters to Aztec Municipal Schools.
But maybe it doesn't have to be, is
Right, I hear
really
you.
the point.
Sure. And maybe making that instruction or those classes more relevant to everyday life. Is that also part of this conversation?
100%. Yeah, Scott, we're exporting our kids at an alarming rate, not only in this community, but around the state. Now, I'm all about higher education. I want kids to go to San Juan College. I want kids to go to New Mexico State and UNM or out of state. But I also want them to come back. And so I want to be able to connect our kiddos with industry that is applicable in their current community, so that they can go get the training that they need, or they can get on-the-job training through some of our different workplace internship programs, and be able to step right back into the community and contribute in a meaningful way, and then kind of perpetuate our way of life.
Well, that sounds like a great segue into our next topic this morning, Mr. Summers, which is your career and technical education offerings at Aztec schools.
Yes, sir.
As a way to get kids ready to get into the job market, and for kids that maybe don't want to go on to higher education and want to hit the ground running and want to get out and start getting into the job market and pulling down a paycheck and things along that line. That is what this is all about, correct?
Absolutely. So when we talk about career and technical education, what we tend to do is we tend to gravitate towards vocational, which is partly true, but it's not completely true. When we're talking about career and technical education at Aztec Municipal School District, it's inclusive of both Vista Nueva High School and Aztec High School. We will be the only high school in the area that will offer 11 New Mexico Public Education Department approved career and technical education pathways. So what
And
is
they're
a
on the
pathway?
screen right now, everybody.
There you are. They're
Yes.
right there. Animal science, natural resources, ag, mechanics and machinery, teacher education, healthcare, welding, construction trades, information technology, computer science, military science, and engineering. And so the first question is, well, what is a pathway? And really what it comes down to is it's 3 aligned electives culminating in kind of capstone courses where industry partners come into the classroom. They're helping us teach. They're really exposing students to real-world application of these particular skills and content areas. And then ultimately that culminates at the senior year in a workplace internship program. So we actually have kids going out into the community in those respective pathways, earning a little bit of money while they're doing it, but also credit, and more importantly, valuable on-the-job experience.
Right.
And I think about that from an education standpoint.
Sure.
You know, we've got teacher education as one of our pathways, and you really don't know what it's like to be a teacher until you step in front of a classroom full of 25 or 30 kids, and it's kind of baptism by fire.
No kidding. Right.
Experiencing our 18-year-olds, or allowing our 18-year-olds to experience that with some of our younger classrooms, I think will be a really eye-opening experience for them, and they'll be able to say, hey, I want to do this, or no, I don't want to do this. And that's the beauty of having pathways at the high school level. It doesn't cost our kids anything. Just a little bit of time. It doesn't cost them any money.
Or parents either.
Or parents, exactly.
Right. And I asked you about that before, as we were talking before we came on the air this morning, that these are great for kids, I think, that know what they want to get into. Like a kid like me that was bitten by the broadcasting bug early on, kind of moved in that direction pretty early on, even in my high school career. But maybe for that student who doesn't quite know what they want to do, you were explaining to me too that this gives them a chance to try out these things.
Absolutely.
If it's not a good fit, it didn't cost them anything except some time. They still got a credit towards graduation, so they still have got that going for them, and they can switch around to something else that might be a better fit.
100%. That's exactly it. This is risk-free career exploration for our kiddos.
Right.
And it's not just vocational. We also have these dual credit pathways. They're not particularly department-approved pathways, but we have 14 different dual credit classes that are offered through San Juan College. Some here at the college, some at the campus of Aztec High School or Vista Nueva, and those are free. Right? I mean, it costs the school money to do that, but it costs our parents really nothing to do that. And so there's a great opportunity for kids to try things out, see if it's a good fit, and more importantly, it's our goal that when students walk across the threshold of Aztec High School or Vista Nueva High School, that they start to identify two of these pathways that they're interested in. And so we know we can't just spring that on our ninth graders. So when we talk about career and technical pathways, we're actually going to be extending this idea of career exploration all the way down to kindergarten. When you go into a kindergarten classroom and you talk about, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Right.
Typically, those kindergartners are going to tell you something that they're familiar with, something that they've seen. Teacher, doctor,
right.
Whatever mom and dad does, or grandma or grandpa, maybe a nurse. But you rarely will see a kindergartner say, I want to be a theme park engineer, because they don't know what that is. They haven't had that exposure. So our goal is to be really strategic about exposing kiddos to these different career pathways that we have, and any more that we can develop over the course of time, so that by the time they do walk across that threshold of the high school, whichever high school it may be, they can pick two pathways that they can live with, that they're interested in, that they're eager to learn more about, and that way if one doesn't work out, they automatically have a fail-safe to revert to. Right.
And so at graduation then, this sets them up for potential jobs or an easy transfer to a course like at San Juan College or
Absolutely.
UNM or Fort Lewis or someplace else, or what does that mean for these high school seniors?
Yeah, 100%. So I think the first thing to kind of talk about is students who are doing workplace internship programs. It's great for the local business and it's great for the kiddo, but ultimately we see that turning into automatic jobs. Get your diploma, kiddo, and I've got a job here waiting for you. So that's fantastic. But the other thing, like you were talking about, Scott, is transfer of credits. So we know that some of our students are aimed for higher education. We support them in that endeavor, and by offering a litany of dual credit courses, they could, in theory, depending on what their field of study is, they could walk across the stage in May at Aztec High School or Vista Nueva, not only with their diploma, but with an associate's degree. Maybe that's in healthcare, right? Healthcare sciences, and they could actually go into a nursing program really, really quickly and have a 4-year nursing degree and only 2 years of higher education.
Gotcha. And that's how it's designed to do. And before we leave this topic, I did want to reach out or ask you that if there's a business or someone involved in a business that's watching us this morning, listening to us this morning, and they're in one of these related fields, but they're not maybe talking to you and talking to the district about offering an internship or something like that, is that something that you'd like to hear from these businesses?
Absolutely.
So to place your kids?
We're going to be doing a workforce convening where we kind of bring in influential businesses and community partners around the community together to really talk about what does this look like, how is this mutually beneficial, what are the expenses associated, what are the guarantees that we can provide. But in the interim, if they want to reach out to me, they can do so, or Milo McMinn, who's our Director of Career and Technical Education. He came with me.
Right, he's been here before, that's true.
Absolutely. Yep. So they can reach out to anybody, and we can get them pointed in the right direction, and we'd love to have you as a partner.
All right, very good. And again, just for the radio audience who can't see the graphic on the screen this morning, these are the areas, these 11 approved career and technical education pathways for your high school students at Aztec schools: animal science, natural resources, ag mechanics and machinery, teacher education, healthcare, welding, construction trades, information technology, computer science, military science, and engineering.
And just to kind of throw one more little breadcrumb people's way, these are not only high wage, but also high demand fields.
Which is why radio's not on the list. I get it. Yes, sir. I see that.
And it's not to say that radio isn't important.
No, no.
But yeah, this is actually data-driven.
Yes, of course.
We've got a partner in the Four Corners Economic Development organization,
right.
and we know that some of their data suggests that these are high-wage, high-growth occupations that we know there are going to be openings for. So while we've got 11 approved pathways for next year, we could have even more the following year. And you can see we also have some other offerings that aren't technically approved pathways, entrepreneurship being one of them. We know that our kiddos today have an amazing mind for entrepreneurism.
Very creative.
Very, very creative. There's a kiddo that my son watches on YouTube who I think he makes $8 million making YouTube videos playing with toys. You know, that's an amazing thing.
Yes,
well,
it is.
How do we tap into that creativity and explore that for our kiddos? So the entrepreneurship pathway, while not officially recognized by the PED, will culminate with kids being able to manufacture their own bicycles. So imagine a bright orange bicycle frame that says Aztec on it, that students actually manufactured and designed and created the marketing scheme for.
Right. Very good. Very interesting. My guest this morning is Kevin Summers. He is the superintendent, of course, with the Aztec Municipal School District. We are talking about just some of the things that folks are working on over in Aztec schools. And so let's talk about calendaring, right? Yeah. And you mentioned that earlier a little bit about some of the things that you are looking at and being different by design, kind of thinking outside the box a little bit about how to incorporate student learning, but also your professional development for your teachers and your staff. And I think there's been a bigger focus on that, at least in the last few years, that I've been paying attention to and noticing, and teachers being offered some of this professional development as kind of things are changing and technology is changing, and we're asking more, I think, of everybody in the workplace. So talk to me about these conversations about the calendar for the next school year, right? 2022, 23.
22-23, correct. Yeah. Yes. So this is the calendaring season, and typically school districts tend to take their last calendar and just change the dates on it, and that becomes their next calendar. But we do want to be different by design, and so we are exploring these options of how do we provide more quality professional development and planning time for our teachers, especially given the last 2 years in this pandemic. Being able to really tap into those digital skills is important for our teachers, and we've got to teach those skills in some cases. But also being able to leverage authentic opportunities for our kiddos is something that's important for us too. So a little bit of a history lesson for you, Scott. Mm-hmm. There are two pieces of legislation, if you will, that dictate what school calendars are. The first is statute, which actually does not tell us the number of days that are required, but it tells us the number of hours. And then there is the New Mexico Administrative Code, which we call rule or regulation, and that does dictate the number of instructional days at 180 days. However, there's also other options. There's options of condensed schedules, which are 150 days, and then there's options of variable schedules, which are essentially year-round schooling.
Right.
And so I think as we look into this, we've got to make great partnerships with our community, not only our parents as stakeholders, but our businesses and the city around us and the county around us as to what is most advantageous. So right now we've got about 7 base calendar options that we're going to consider. Some of these are going to be contingent on the language that exists currently in House Bill 2 or the Appropriations Act. But we are putting together an internal calendar committee that essentially covers all of our campuses and multiple positions, both administrative and teaching. And what we're going to do is take those 7 base calendars. We're going to mess around with the start and end times. We always talk about San Juan County Fair, and we always have kids and teachers missing for San Juan County Fair. So maybe we need to look at starting school after the fair.
Right.
Things of that sort. What holidays are we going to consider? Are we going to consider early release times? We've got an early release dedicated every week now, every Friday. Kiddos get out about 1:30. Is that something that we still want to do? Because if we do, then what do we want? Do we want it to be Friday? Do we want it to be a Monday? Do we want it to be a Wednesday? Or could we recoup that time and structure it elsewhere? Mm-hmm. Professional development days obviously is important, but when we talk about these workplace internship programs and the effects that the pandemic have had on our kiddos and our families, we recognize that there's a need for embedding opportunity for kids to go be able to do those things, the workplace internship programs, or to seek remediation or credit recovery and not miss out on their current instructional time. So in order to do that, I think we've got an obligation, ethical obligation as educators to say, how do we do this different, and how do we structure this in a way that maybe is a little unconventional, but is something that we can all live with and agree on. So once our calendar committee has set those options, then they'll take them to their various campuses and departments to narrow down those options. And the goal for us is 3. If we can get 3 calendars that are distinct and unique, but we can all live with, and we can do those different by design initiatives that we have, then we'll take those 3 calendars, we'll send them out to the community at large. That includes our parents, that includes our community members, that includes our businesses, that includes our teachers and our administrators as well, and we'll send them out for popular vote. Whichever one wins is the one that we'll take to the school board for official adoption.
Got you. And so I was going to ask you about parents, because again, whenever there's a change to a school calendar, parents may have to think about childcare or other things if they're not going to be in school 5 days a week or whatever the case may be. And of course, after COVID, maybe it's not as big a deal as it used to be, switching to being home with your kid or not. But it certainly is still a change for folks, right?
Absolutely.
And so you want their input. And
Still
they'll have a chance to do that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, we'll probably also have some public forums so that parents and community members can come in and say, here are the advantages, or here are the disadvantages, here are the potential hardships, or here are the benefits of doing that. So we'll have significant opportunities for parents and the community at large to contribute to this process, because I do believe that you're correct. While it's somewhat easier in some cases for people to shift and stay home with their kiddos, in other cases it's not. So we have to take that into consideration. We also have to take into consideration economic variables.
Right.
For instance, the city of Aztec is on a 4-day week. The county, San Juan County, is on a 4-day week in certain cases.
Sure.
So taking those things into consideration are important as well.
Right. And what about the similarities with other school districts and having your calendars match up? Is that anything worth thinking about as well?
Yeah, it is. So we have
for sports schedules maybe, or things like that too.
Yeah, I think the sports schedules are largely pretty concrete. Typically in our district,
they're their own thing.
Yeah, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Right.
By and large, Fridays is always football, right?
That's right.
But when we
your
talk
predecessor
about,
used to say how you always get along every other day of the week, but Tuesdays and Thursdays, all bets are off.
That's exactly
and
right.
I hear you.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Exactly right. But when we talk about the other districts, Farmington, Bloomfield, Central, we've got people who may live in those communities, who their kids may go to those schools, but there are employees, or vice versa. And so taking into consideration similarities is something that's important. And while it's not necessarily a popular opinion, at the end of the day, I kind of have this selfish opinion that I don't really care what Farmington does unless it's good for Aztec and Aztec kiddos. But having those considerations are important. So it's something that we can't just totally disregard, because we do know we've got parents and students that live in other districts that come to work for us or come to school with us, or vice versa. They live in Aztec and they work in Farmington or Bloomfield, so we need to be considerate of that.
Gotcha. And that makes sense. And that's fair, I think, and reasonable.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so there you go. And so with the regards to the legislative things, those will be determined here in the next, I would assume, 60 days or less, right? With the legislature wrapping up this week, and the governor will sign, veto, or line item veto, or whatever gets to her desk. So you'll know, at least from that standpoint, how things stand as you start this planning process.
Exactly.
And when things hit maybe May, summertime, and start having some hearings or some public forums, as you mentioned, or feedback from the public, that's where things will stand.
You're spot on, Scott. So the legislature actually ends later this week. From there, the governor will have 20 days to either sign bills into law. In terms of the Appropriations Act, we're talking about dollars, right? So that's going to have to get signed into law. The question becomes, what line item vetoes is the governor going to address here? So she'll have about 20 days to do that. So we're looking somewhere right after spring break. We'll be able to convene our calendar committee, and we might not have 7 base calendar options anymore. We might only have 4.
True, right? That's true.
But those decisions in the next couple of weeks are going to be pretty important to how we move forward with our calendaring committees.
Gotcha. Very good. Well, Kevin Summers, always great to visit with you, and we'll hope to have you back that week in March to talk about how things look, maybe after all this dust is settled from the legislative session. So
absolutely.
We'll look forward to it.
Well, I do too. Thank you very much, Scott. I always appreciate being here.
You bet. Great to have you here. Thank you. That is Superintendent Kevin Summers from the Aztec School District, my guest this morning here on KSJE. KSJE and San Juan College present the Student Success Coaching Tip of the Week.
Welcome! We're back at Week 5, Coaching Tips of the Week. My name is Emin Chi with the Student Achievement Center. This week is asking for help. If you really don't understand a concept, ask questions. Stop by your professor's office during their office hours, or contact classmates and your professors via email or Canvas. You can go to the tutoring center. Some classes might even have a Facebook group to keep students engaged and to create an environment to ask questions outside of class. Either way, your professors will be on your side, non-judgmental, wanting to help you understand the class in its entirety.
The Student Success Coaching Tip of the Week, presented by KSJE and the Student Achievement Center at San Juan College. KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, a community-owned and operated hospital. Here for you when you need us. From emergency care to routine checkups and screenings, caregivers are here and ready to provide the safe, high-quality care you need close to home. Online at sanjuanregional.com with the latest health information and resources to help you live life better here.